The coffee was still hot when my son sat down across from me and told me he'd already made up his mind. He didn't ask. He didn't knock on my front door that morning with the soft, uncertain look of a man who needed something. He walked in with his shoulders back and his voice steady, the way someone walks into a room they already consider theirs. He pulled out the kitchen chair, his father's chair, and sat in it like he'd been sitting there his whole life, which I supposed he had. But his father was gone, and this was my kitchen now. And something about the way he set his coffee mug down on the table without a coaster told me this conversation was going to cost me something. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk about the house." I kept my hands around my own mug. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard. I could hear the refrigerator hum. I waited. My son, Nathan, 37 years old, married 8 years, father of 3, leaned forward with his elbows on the table and laid it out for me like he was presenting a business proposal. He and Brianna had been thinking about it for a while now. Their rental lease was up at the end of next month. The market was too expensive to buy right now. The kids needed stability. And I had this house, 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, the finished basement, the big backyard all to myself. "It makes sense, Mom," he said. "You're rattling around in here alone." I said, "I like rattling." He smiled, but not like something was funny. More like I'd said something that needed to be gently corrected. "We'd help with the bills," he said. "Brianna's mom would be coming too, just temporarily. She needs to get back on her feet." I set my mug down. "Brianna's mother. She's been having a hard time since the divorce. She just needs a few months." I looked at him. My son, the boy I'd driven to every baseball practice, every dentist appointment, every school play, the boy whose college tuition I'd paid in full because I wanted him to start his adult life without debt. The man who was now sitting in his dead father's chair, telling me that he and his wife and their 3 children and his mother-in-law would be moving into my home, temporarily. "And where would I sleep?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. That's the part that stays with me, even now. He didn't hesitate even for a second. "We thought you could take the bonus room," he said. "Just for a little while, until we get settled. Brianna's mom has the bad knee, so she'd need a room on the main floor. And the kids, we'd put them in your old sewing room and the guest room. Brianna and I would take the master, obviously." Obviously. I had lived in that master bedroom for 31 years. I had brought both of my children home from the hospital to that house. I had sat in that bedroom and held my husband's hand in the last weeks of his life. I had stood at that bathroom mirror the morning after his funeral and told myself I was going to be okay. And now my son was sitting across from me telling me that I would be moving into the bonus room so that his mother-in-law's bad knee would be more comfortable. "Nathan," I said quietly, "Mom, it's practical. The bonus room has its own bathroom. You'd have privacy." "Nathan," I kept my voice even. I had learned a long time ago that the steadier your voice, the more seriously people listen. "I don't want to do this." He looked at me the way people look at elderly relatives when they say something inconvenient. Patient. Slightly pained. Like I was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. "Mom, we've already talked to Brianna's mom. She's been planning on this. She's already started packing." I didn't agree to any of this. "We figured you'd understand once we explained it." I looked at him for a long moment. My son, my firstborn. And I understood then that he genuinely did not see anything wrong with what he was saying. He had made a decision that involved my home, my space, my life, and it had not occurred to him, not once, to ask me first. It had not occurred to him that my answer might be no. He had called it practical. He had said, obviously. He had said, "We figured." I said, "I need some time to think." He nodded like that was reasonable, like I was simply processing the good news. "Don't take too long," he said. "Lease is up in 6 weeks." After he left, I sat at that kitchen table for a long time. The dog next door had stopped barking. The refrigerator was still humming. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I thought about calling my daughter, Patrice, but I knew she would say the same thing she always said, that Nathan meant well, that I should try to be flexible, that the grandchildren would love spending more time with me. Patrice had a way of making my discomfort sound like selfishness. I thought about calling my best friend Eleanor, who would have told me to change the locks and call a lawyer. Eleanor had always been the clearer thinker between the two of us. Instead, I sat there and I thought about my husband, Gerald. Gerald, who had worked overtime for 3 years to save the down payment on this house. Gerald, who had built the raised garden beds in the backyard with his own 2 hands. Gerald, who had made me promise, the week before he passed, that I would not let this house go until I was ready. I was 64 years old. I had raised 2 children in this house. I had mourned my husband in this house. I had learned, slowly and imperfectly, how to live alone in this house. And my son had just told me, not asked me, told me that I would be moving into the bonus room. I picked up my phone, not to call Nathan, not to call Patrice. I called my real estate attorney, a woman named Sandra who had helped me manage Gerald's estate 3 years ago. We had not spoken since the estate was settled, but she remembered me immediately. "Carol," she said, "what can I do for you?" I told her I needed to understand my options. The next 2 weeks were quiet on the surface. Nathan texted me every few days with updates. Brianna had found a preschool nearby for the youngest. His mother-in-law, Linda, had started packing up her apartment. The kids were excited about the backyard. He assumed my silence was acceptance. That was his first mistake. I met with Sandra twice. I spoke with a financial advisor. I called a realtor named Thomas, who had sold 2 homes on my street in the last year, and who walked through my house on a Tuesday morning with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. "It's a strong market right now," Thomas told me. "I'd list it at $480, probably close at $465, maybe $470 if we price it right. $465,000. Gerald and I had bought this house for $112. "How quickly?" I asked. 3 weeks if we're lucky," he said. "Possibly less. I had already found the place I wanted. A small condominium in a 55-plus community about 40 minutes south of where I lived now. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a little patio with a garden wall, close to Eleanor, close to the library where I volunteered on Wednesday mornings, far enough from Nathan that an unexpected visit would require actual planning. I put down a deposit the same afternoon I met with Thomas. I want to be honest about something, because honesty matters to me more now than it ever did when I was younger. I was not cold about this. I was not unfeeling. Every night during those 2 weeks, I sat in the living room of the house I had lived in for 3 decades, and I let myself feel everything. The grief of leaving, the guilt of not telling my son what I was doing, the fear that I was making a mistake I couldn't undo. I cried more than once. I looked at the height marks on the doorframe in the hallway, where Gerald and I had measured the children every birthday from age 3 to age 17. I stood in the backyard and put my hands in the raised beds and felt the cold November soil and talked to Gerald like I sometimes do when no one is watching. But here's what I kept coming back to. My son had not asked me. My son had decided. My son had told Brianna's mother she could move in before he'd even spoken to me. My son had assigned me the bonus room the way you assign a storage closet with efficiency and without sentiment. And when I had told him, quietly and clearly, that I didn't want this, he had looked at me like I was being impractical. I thought about what Gerald would have said. Gerald, who had loved Nathan fiercely and without reservation, but who had also been the first to call our son out when he was wrong. Gerald would have said, "You have already told him no, Carol." He didn't listen. That tells you everything you need to know about what comes next. I signed the listing agreement on a Wednesday. The house had 3 showings in the first week. An offer came in on day 9, $462,000, almost full asking, with a 45-day close. Sandra reviewed it. Thomas reviewed it. I signed. I did not tell Nathan. I know how that sounds. I know there are people who will read this and say, I should have handled it differently, that I should have had another conversation, that I should have given him a chance to understand. But here's what they don't know. I did. I told him no, and he told me Brianna's mother had already started packing. He had made his decision without consulting me, and I made mine the same way. 3 weeks after I signed the listing agreement, Nathan called on a Sunday evening. He sounded cheerful. He said they'd finished packing up their storage unit and Brianna had started looking at furniture for the master bedroom. He mentioned, casually, that Linda Brianna's mother wanted to know if there was room in the garage for some of her things. "Nathan," I said, "I need to tell you something." Something in my voice made him go quiet. "I've sold the house," I said. "The closing is in 3 weeks." There was a silence that lasted so long, I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. "You what?" "I've accepted an offer on the house. I'm moving to Lakeview Commons at the end of the month." "Mom." His voice had changed entirely. The cheerful son who called about furniture was gone. "Mom, you can't, we have a plan." Brianna's mother gave up her apartment. "She's all ready, you can't just—" "I can," I said. "This is my house. It has always been my house." "You didn't even tell us you were thinking about this." I let that sit between us for a moment before I answered. "Nathan," I said gently, "you didn't tell me you were moving in before you'd decided. You told me after. I learned something from you." The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the first one. This one had weight to it. "This is unbelievable," he said finally. "Mom, this is our family home. Dad's house. You're just selling it out from under us?" "Dad's house," I said, "was purchased with my name on the deed. I've lived in it for 31 years. I've paid the property taxes for 31 years, and I paid them alone for the last 3. It is not your house, Nathan. It was never your house. I can't believe you would do this." His voice had gone tight and low in a way I recognized from when he was a teenager, that particular register he used when he felt wronged. "You planned this behind our backs." "Yes," I said. "I did. That's Mom. That's cruel. Linda doesn't have anywhere to go. The kids were so excited. Do you know how excited the kids were?" I did know. He had told me, in text after text, how excited the kids were, and I loved those grandchildren with everything in me. But loving them didn't mean surrendering my home. "The kids are welcome to visit me at my new place," I said. "There's a pool." "A pool." He said it like I'd told him something absurd. "You think a pool makes up for this?" "Nathan, I am not trying to make anything up. I told you I didn't want this arrangement. You told me it was already decided. You told me your mother-in-law's knee made it necessary for her to have the main floor room. You assigned me the bonus room." I paused. "I am 64 years old? I am not moving into a bonus room in my own home?" He was quiet again. "And then, we're going to have to figure out where Linda is going to live. This is going to be a disaster. You know that, right? Brianna is going to be—" "I hope Brianna is well," I said. "I hope you find something that works for your family. I mean that. Are you serious right now?" "I've never been more serious." He hung up. I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there in the kitchen that would no longer be mine in 3 weeks, and I waited to see how I felt. I thought I might feel guilty. I thought I might feel the urge to call him back and say, "Never mind, let's talk again. Let's work something out." I didn't feel any of those things. What I felt was something quieter than triumph and something steadier than relief. I felt like myself. I felt like the woman who had sat in a hospital room for 6 days straight and never left Gerald's side. The woman who had gone back to work at 59 to cover the medical bills. The woman who had figured out the taxes and the estate and the plumbing leak in the basement and every other thing that needed figuring out, alone, without asking anyone to carry it for her. I felt like someone who had made a decision about her own life. That turned out to be a feeling I had been missing for quite some time. Patrice called 2 days later. I could tell from the first 3 words, Mom. I heard that Nathan had gotten to her first. She spent the first 5 minutes of the call explaining how upset Brianna was, how displaced Linda felt, how the children had been asking questions. I listened without interrupting. That was one of the things Eleanor had always said about me. You are very good at listening to things that are not your problem. I just think, Patrice said finally, in her careful voice, that maybe there was a way to handle this that didn't involve selling the house without telling anyone. I told Nathan, after it was already done. Nathan told me about his plans after they were already made, I said. He'd already spoken to Linda. He'd already assigned the rooms. He told me it was decided. I learned from his example. There was a pause. That's different, Mom. Is it? She struggled with this for a moment, I could hear her trying to find the angle from which my son was right, and I was wrong. She is a good woman, my daughter, but she has always found it easier to smooth things over than to look directly at them. I just want the family to be okay, she said finally. The family will be okay, I said. Nathan's family needs to find a place to live that works for them. They're capable of doing that. He has a job. She has a job. They will figure it out. I paused. I am not able to want less for myself just to make that figuring out easier for them. Patrice was quiet for a long moment, and then, surprising me slightly, she said, "Did you really tell him no, and he didn't listen?" I said I didn't want it. He told me Brianna's mother had already started packing. Another silence. Softer this time. "Okay," she said. "Okay, Mom." The call Nathan made 4 days after that one was different. He called in the evening, and when I answered, his voice was quieter than it had been. Not soft. Exactly. Nathan has never been a soft person, but the tight, wronged quality was gone from it. He said he'd been thinking. He said Brianna, and he had spent a few nights really talking, and Brianna had said something he hadn't expected, which was that she probably would have done the same thing I did if she were me. I liked Brianna for that. "I still think you could have told me," he said. "You're right," I said. "I could have. I was afraid you'd try to stop me, and I didn't trust that I would hold firm. That part wasn't fair to you, and I'm sorry for it." He was quiet. "But Nathan, you came into my kitchen, and you told me where I was going to sleep, in my own house. You didn't ask. You had already decided." I kept my voice steady. "I have never, in your entire life, made a decision about your home without asking you first. I need you to understand that what you did hurt me, not because you needed a place to live. I understand that, but because you didn't think to ask." I heard him exhale. It was a long, slow sound, the kind that comes at the end of something. "I didn't think about it that way," he said finally. "I know. I think I thought you'd just be glad to have us there." "I know that too," I said. "But that's not the same as asking." We talked for another hour that night. Not easily. There were silences and restarts and a few moments where I thought he might get defensive again and he thought better of it. But we talked in a way we hadn't in a long time. Honestly, without performance. He told me that he and Brianna had found a 2-bedroom apartment nearby that they could afford if they stretched a little. Linda had found a situation with a friend from her church, a room rental, month to month, while she got back on her feet. It wasn't the plan they'd had, but it was a plan. "Mom," he said, near the end of the call, "are you going to be okay? In the new place?" "I'm going to be more than okay," I said, and I meant it. I meant it more fully than I had meant almost anything I'd said in the past 3 years. The closing happened on a cold Thursday morning in December. Sandra was there. Thomas was there. The buyers were a couple in their early 30s, a woman who kept touching the kitchen countertops like she was already imagining meals she'd make there, and a man who asked questions about the garden beds in the backyard with genuine interest. I told him what was planted where. I told him about the soil mix Gerald had used. He wrote it down. I didn't cry at the closing. I thought I might. But when I signed my name for the last time on the last page, and Thomas handed me the copy and said, "Congratulations," what I felt was clear and clean and light, the way the air feels after a hard rain has finally moved through. I drove to Lakeview Commons with the windows down despite the cold. Eleanor was waiting in the parking lot with 2 coffees and a box of glazed donuts, which is exactly the kind of friend she has always been. She hugged me in the parking lot and did not say anything sentimental, which I also loved about her. My furniture was already inside. The movers had come 2 days before, and I had arranged everything myself. The good reading chair by the window that caught the morning light, Gerald's framed photograph on the bookshelf, where I could see it from the kitchen, the small wooden box of his things on the top shelf of the closet, where I would know it was there without it being the first thing I saw every morning. My patio faced a small courtyard with a fountain. In the spring, I planned to plant something in the garden wall beds, herbs, maybe, or something with color. The neighbors I had met so far were quiet people who nodded when they passed and did not presume. Nathan brought the grandchildren to visit in February. He texted ahead this time. He asked if Sunday worked. I said, Sunday worked beautifully. They came in the early afternoon, my son, his wife, the 3 kids in their winter coats, and Brianna hugged me longer than she usually did. And I understood that to be its own kind of apology, one she was not quite ready to say in words yet. That was all right. I have learned that things take the time they take. The youngest, Mia, who had just turned 4, discovered the fountain in the courtyard within approximately 90 seconds of arrival and spent the rest of the visit trying to put her mittens in it. The older 2 played cards with Eleanor, who had stayed for lunch because I'd asked her to, and because she never says no to a meal she doesn't have to cook herself. Nathan stood on my little patio with his hands in his coat pockets, looking out at the courtyard. I stood beside him. "It's nice," he said. "The place? I know." He was quiet for a moment. "Dad would have liked it." "I think so too," I said. He always liked things that were the right size. Nathan smiled, and it was a real one this time, not the managed smile from the kitchen table, not the tight smile of a man rearranging someone else's life into something convenient. It was the smile I remembered from when he was young, open, and a little unguarded. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, not elaborately, not with justifications attached, just that. "I know," I said. "I forgive you." We stood there a little longer while Mia shrieked with delight at the fountain and Eleanor's laugh carried through the glass door from inside. The sky was pale and thin with winter light. A bird landed on the garden wall and sat there for a moment, like it was deciding something, and then it flew off. I was 64 years old, standing on a patio that was exactly the right size, in a life I had rebuilt with my own 2 hands. And I was fine. I was better than fine. I was home. There are people who will hear this story and say, I could have handled it differently. Maybe there was a version of these events in which I sat Nathan down a second time, or a third, and something shifted. Maybe there was a conversation we could have had that would have changed everything before it needed to change at all. But here is what I know. I told him no, and he told me it was already decided. And once someone tells you that your feelings, your home, your life are already decided without you, you learn something about how they see you, not who they are in their best moments, not who they might become, but who they are in the moment they think they have the advantage. I learned something about who I was in that moment too. I was a woman who had been quiet long enough. I hope my son carries this with him. I hope, someday, he passes it on to his own children. Not the betrayal of it, not the hurt, but the lesson underneath. The one I have spent 64 years learning in pieces and finally understand whole. The people who love you will ask, the rest will decide. Ask first, always ask first.